We've got a great speaker now, our keynote. The man is not only the global CEO of Young & Rubicam, but I can firmly say a global mensch, David Sable. He is a terrific man, he's a smart man, he's very philanthropic. He has led the agency, he was once at Wunderman and runs global businesses, and everybody that works for him, and I know a lot of them, are enthralled every day, they're inspired every day. His clients feel the same way. His boss, Martin Sorrell, also feels the same way, although Martin's always pushing the agenda for sure. David's got a very busy schedule. He's actually put off some European visits to come with us today. So let me introduce someone who's going to talk about content, video everywhere, the importance of telling stories, the importance of humans still being in the equation in addition to technologies. My friend, global CEO and global mensch, David Sable.
Thank you, thank you. So the view really just set me up. And I think that it's important to understand that everything today is place-based. Everything is digital, everything is place-based, but most importantly, and this is really where I want to get into, free is not a sustainable model. And if we want to have digital place-based, if we want to have great content, if we want to be able to give our consumers, our customers, our clients, just the general public, the kind of content, the kind of things we know they want to see, we need to understand what's driving the market, what works, and what doesn't. So, you know, as I sat and started to prepare for it, of course, I went and started to look at what some people are saying just in general about TV, about video. And, you know, when you read this, it's pretty disheartening, right? Live TV viewing is dying by 1,000 paper cuts. My God, like what's going to happen to the Super Bowl? The great unbundling. Those who follow my writing know I've been writing a lot about, are we actually cutting cords or just connecting ourselves with lots of more threads? But it's dying, it's dying. Television won't last, it's a flash in the pan, so maybe 70 years later, maybe it's done. So when I read that, I thought, okay, that's it. I just gave you my whole presentation, thank you. Because like, what more could you say? But then I was inspired. I was incredibly inspired this week, and I was inspired by the millennial bad boys. Because Vice, and again, go back, you can Google or Bing. Microsoft's a client, so I say Bing at least once every presentation. But you can go back and search and find out what Shane had been saying about television for the past 5 years, right? So the guys who started with their free magazine up in Canada and then went basically to free digital, sold to HBO. And 3 years of advertising is sold out. But more importantly, they have now made a deal for a cable network. Think about that. Vice has made a deal for a cable network, not just here in the US, but around the world. Now, if that doesn't give you inspiration to make you feel good and make you believe in the future of this business and the future of video, nothing, anything, anybody can say can possibly bring you there. So in the next 25 minutes or so, I have 4 things I want to talk about. I want to go back over some predictions, come into what I consider to be the reality, thoughts for the record, and then just leave you with a final thought. So let's start with the predictions. So here's just a bunch of predictions. The reason that I picked these because they're all around media, and I think it's important to understand what people have been saying or are saying in general, because I think it gives you a sense of where digital place-based might be. So Charlie Chaplin talked about cinema not being good way back when, being dead, but today, cinema is still strong. Despite what anybody tells you, cinema is still strong, even on a like-for-like basis. So print media are dead, we all know that, yet catalogs have had this huge resurgence because smart retailers who listen to their customers and not to analysts have figured out that, in fact, there's a huge, tremendous, powerful, leverageable balance between what they do on the web, what they do in the retail stores, if they have them, and many do. And by the way, Amazon's just opened one, something I've been writing about for years. They finally did it. And what happens online. So catalogs are back. Online database, online will never be a source for news. And yet we know, forget Google taking on, Snapchat is hiring editors from CNN. Hello. So everything that we write about, and of course television, people still watch TV. But this was the prediction that I thought was the most important, because I think this is the one that gets to the point. In this exponentially fractured media landscape, television audiences will likely get smaller. They have been for decades. Now, what does fractured have to do with getting smaller? Like, just think about the logic there for a second, because I think the logic is wrong, and I think you'll see as I go through the reality why I believe that's completely not true. So the first thing was, it all depends on how you define TV. And those of you who still define TV because you think TV is ABC, CBS, or NBC, you're out of sync. It's wrong. It's got nothing to do with it, because we are watching more video than we have ever watched in the history of mankind. Video itself, the power of video storytelling, has never been stronger, and I think is only going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And more video is being watched for longer and longer periods of time all around the world. Now, when you look at it, and I always like to give you some proof points, but I love this from Nielsen. If you go back to 2010, look at the places and look at the numbers of where you could watch video. But now look what you can do just 2 years ago. That's still video. That's still TV. I don't care what you call it. That is still TV. Those numbers are growing, and the amount of time we're spending watching this stuff is growing and growing and growing. So the importance, the critical importance of this to our businesses, to your business and to my business, I've never been more excited, because I think it just shows that the future is big and important. Now, by the way, anybody here go to CES? Yes, raise your hands. Okay, so you're all invited to come with me on a tour. You can come with me and Erwin Gottlieb, go with Shelley Palmer. Just go on one of the tours. Just take a look at the number of screens being sold, whether they're in cars, whether they're in your pocket, whether they're on your wall. But look at the growing number of screens. And let me tell you something. I don't care what you go to CES to see, and I don't care what you read about it and the great innovation and the big data and everything else that surrounds it. Everybody who goes there centers on the screens. That is where the action is. And you'll go and you'll see all the big screens, the small screens, the incredible screens, the 3D screens, the curved screens, the screens that give you HD. That is where the action is, because it's about the viewing experience. That is what people are interested in. Now, what's happened? So we're watching more. We have more places to watch. We have more screens to watch. Well, what happens? There are more shows to watch. So if you take a look, in 1999, there were just 26 series that you could watch on TV. Whatever TV was, is, makes no difference. Today, and that's when looking at cable, and it's looking at streaming, and Netflix, and Hulu, and yada, 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 there are over 1,700 series that we're at. I'm not talking about user-generated content. I'm not talking about the cats peeing on your shoes. I'm talking about serious shows that are being created, that have drama, that have really good and important values, production values around them, and scripts. And by the way, I'll just make a note about the production value. If you go back 6 or 7 years and think about the shows you were watching, and think about shows like Spartacus and others, and I'm not putting them down, but I call those death porn. And you look at all of think about the blue screening. Think about the CGI that was used to fill in, because they were actually fairly cheap productions. And then take a look at the stuff that's being produced today. All of it, not on set, but on location. Huge production values. It's unbelievable. We are in a renaissance of production. We're in a renaissance of storytelling. And they're only going to be more and better as we go along. But then at the same time, there's a continued demand even for reruns. So Seinfeld, for sure, we get that, right? I was never particularly a Seinfeld friend, but Seinfeld makes more money in reruns than they did when it was on the air. But even more important, Friends. There is this resurgence among young people, 17 years old. They weren't even born when the show was running. And it's become hot. It's a property. People are watching it. And then, of course, the medium that's dying by 1,000 cuts, sports. So the Super Bowl in 2015 was the largest television broadcast in history, right? It was huge. What's most interesting about it, though, and I'm going to come back to this at the end, was that only a tiny portion of it was streaming. Tiny, 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 tiny. It was all watched live broadcast. But then when you go back to the Olympics, interestingly enough, although the primetime audience live was huge, the streaming audience was very, very large. There's over 30 million people. Why? Because people were watching at different times. They were watching different segments at different times through different methods. So all this put together to me, is exciting and just shows you what the demand is and how it continues. But there's no question that we watch differently, right? We download, we steal, we torrent, we stream. We TiVo, subscribe, rent, access through Slingbox, which I love, network apps, Roku, Apple TV, VPN, and of course we binge. Now, I wish when I was a teenager, I would have died for this. I mean, I think I would have given my life up. I would have given you 10 years of my life, God, if I had binging when I was younger. But think about that. 2% of Netflix subscribers watch episode after episode after episode. They'll just sit there all night long or all day long and watch and watch and watch. So all new ways of watching. And every time, every show, every series, every new channel gives us a new opportunity to understand and to market and to do something different. But maybe most importantly, we pine for premium. So I bring you YouTube, right? Launching a subscription service for premium videos. Now, many of you, and I'm sure you've heard the same presentations that I did a number of years ago, the YouTube people came around and they were basically telling us that they were going to put us out of business, us as in the ad agencies, because user-generated content and consumer-generated advertising was going to replace everything that was on television, and we were all dead, and they were going to own everything. Well, again, the cat's peeing on your shoes might be shared by lots of people, and it might be funny and it might be cute, but it's not monetizable. And there are not many brands that want to associate themselves with that kind of content. So finally, they've woken up too, and they realize that we need to have great, incredible, powerful content. And I call your attention to Amazon, and again, you can search this because I think it's worthwhile reading. But if you go back 2.5 years, interestingly enough, Amazon came out and said, you know, our algorithm is going to be able to generate the best shows in the world because we know everything about our users, our watchers, the people who are online with us. So we're never going to make a mistake. We're just going to make the best content, and nobody remembers anything that they produced during that period. But then they come along and say, and they had the same press conference now, a year and a half later, and they say, well, what did you think? And this is the quote, that bing, 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 we'd press a button on the computer and out would come a show. And what they did, they hired Woody Allen. And now they're making great content. We pine for premium. It's important. So had I only known that television was premium content, had we all only known that, we'd all be richer and happier today. So let's set the record straight. The narrow definition of TV is digibabble. The television in the back of a taxi, the screen in an elevator, the outdoor is as much television as what you once watched, as what we once watched. If you don't get that, then sit here for the rest of the day and listen carefully, because it is. And I suggest that you read Michael's book, because I think he's right. Television is the new television. It is simple. It is simple, and Netflix is just a great example of that. And then when you look at what great content does and how it works, this is important, right? So our good friend Bruce Jenner, so a record was set for the web, but it wasn't because it was set for the web. The record was set on 2020, biggest audience they ever had, biggest audience that genre ever had, but then it led to ABC News, ABC.com, the servers being absolutely overwhelmed by the response because people wanted to see it again and again and again. They wanted to watch segments of it. So one led to the other. And the Twitter record started with print. So don't think about any one piece. We have to think about the entire ecosystem of media, of people. It's all about people. Now this one I love, right? Josh Malina. Anybody a fan of Josh's? Yes?
I am.
Good. Let's hear it for Josh. So when Josh was on Big Bang and West Wing, nobody ever heard of him. I don't think he knew of himself, right? But now he's become a huge Twitterer. He is a tweeter. And all of the people who are with him tweet. So they tweet live during every segment. And there are hundreds of thousands of tweets that are generated. He loves this because he says nobody knew him except his family. So he boosts and is not booted by. So people say, no, Twitter kills TV. Absolutely not. It enhances, it makes it better. It gives us more opportunity to watch and to do. And of course, hello, advertising pays for content. I love this, right? Everybody's figuring this out now. Advertising pays for content. There are 3 ways you get content. You can steal it, you can pay for it, or you can watch the advertising. That's it. I don't care, digital schmidgital. There's 3 ways you can pay for content. So if you're not stealing it, you're watching advertising or you're paying for content. Now, if I make you pay for all the content, trust me that the price per month is going to be way higher than anything you've ever thought about on cable and being connected and yada, yada, yada. So advertising has a big play here, which no doubt is why we hear from Snapchat, it's going to feel a little weird at first, guys, but we're taking the plunge. We need to make money. These are the guys who swore they would never, ever sell advertising on a platform. And of course, Instagram now has started to debut 30-second video ads. So wherever we look, we have screens, we have opportunity, we have video. And we need to understand it, and we need to make it work. And you know, when you look at Jimmy Fallon, I think it's great. 70% of his audience is online, but they're not watching the whole show. They're watching segments. And finally, NBC woke up to it, and they said, wow, 70% is watching, and we're not monetizing it. So they've put advertising on it. Makes sense. Might not be working right yet, but somebody's going to figure it out. Somebody will. So even Jimmy Fallon is joined the bandwagon, if you will. So here's something to ponder, and with this, I'll leave this part of the presentation. The NFL contracts are up in 2022. Here's my prediction. That is when the next big change happens. Because the question is, who gets that contract? Is it going to be Google? Will it be one of the traditional broadcasters? Will it be Facebook? Will it be somebody who's not in the market yet? Could be. And let's understand what's happening. So the first live stream of an NFL show streamed some 15 million or so people. Now, if that was a regular live stream, if that was shared content, we'd think, wow, that's great. But when you have 150 million people, whatever, watching the Super Bowl, that's not a whole lot of people. But it's going to get better. It'll get better, it'll be more interesting, and we're going to be watching this in the back of cabs, streaming live, one day. So think about that. That's something I just leave you. I don't have an answer, but I really do believe that is going to be the next huge inflection. And understanding that and thinking about it is where we're going to make it go. So a few last thoughts. The first is the future of free is just dismal, guys. Because if you still believe that user-generated content free is the future, then you don't belong here, and you don't belong in my business, and if you represent a brand, your company's in trouble. That's I can tell you. Because it's not. That's not what people want. Listen to our audiences. Listen to your audiences. Think about what you like to watch. Think about what you like to do. So we need to understand it's not free, and it's not limited to screens. Television is everything. It's everywhere. Anytime you watch on a screen, you're watching on TV. And remember what Warren Buffett said, price is what you pay, but value is what you get. And with that, one final piece that proves the point, I think this drives it home better than anything. This was on maybe 2 seconds in the back of cabs, 3 seconds, I don't know. Can I tell you, this is not a joke, I swear, 100 messages, calls, emails, texts you can't imagine from people sitting in the backs of cabs who saw this. I had no idea. I had no idea. And all of a sudden, people, friends of mine visiting from abroad are saying, what the hell are you doing in the back of a cab on the television? You can't imagine. So if you don't think it works, just put your picture up and watch what happens. It's crazy. So with that, I thank you. And we have time for a couple of questions.
Stay up here, yeah.
We have time for a couple of questions.
That's great. I've got a couple first for you, David. So wonderful. What a great presentation, putting everything in context, video everywhere, screens everywhere, the evolution of media, television. You talk a lot about primary kind of content. You know, we pine for premium. It's a great term used. You know, along with that, there's not cats peeing, but there's Netflix, there's Showtime On Demand, HBO Go. I spoke about this a little bit earlier this morning. With that comes, at times, no ads. You know, Netflix is not running ads, Showtime, HBO Go is. How do you, as working for your great marketing brands, how do you adjust to that where some of the really good content and some of the new accesses to content don't have advertising.
Keeps me up at night.
Yeah,
So the answer is, as I said, ultimately there are three ways to pay for content. You steal, you buy, you steal, you pay, you watch advertising. Right. Now, as we cut the cord, right, so here's what happens. There was a great piece, maybe it was in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago. Somebody added up the costs. So if you start adding up the costs of watching great content in a month, all of a sudden, and you add to it the cost of your access, just having general digital internet access, you're back up at the cost of cable. So some smart person is going to come along and say, as they already are, Google, I think, is obviously primed for this, as are others, and say, hey, I got this great idea for you. I will charge you one fee. And by the way, I'd watch Comcast on this for sure. I got a great idea for you. I will give you access to all this great stuff you like, Netflix and yada, 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 yada. And you'll also get the live stuff. And all you have to do is pay me X amount of months. And now we're back to a cable-ish model, a subscription model. And we're going to put some advertising.
Here you go.
We will be back. We will be back in that
Right.
model, because this has nothing to do with digital, has nothing to do with new business models. It has nothing to do with old versus new. It has to do with basic economics. Somebody has to pay.
It's good content, high quality. Somebody's got to pay.
Somebody's got to
do
pay.
revenue streams to pay for it.
Somebody's got to pay.
Great point. I like the term digital schmigital you mentioned. Reminds me of a term that
I use
Stuart Elliott
professional
used.
terms all the time.
Stuart Elliott had a similar term earlier, which kind of goes to a question I'm going to ask you about smushing together creative and media like it used to be. I think smushing and digital schmigital probably were born in the sheitel or something like that is where they came from, right? So along those lines, what are your thoughts, David, of, you know, because you've got great experience in creative and account and planning and media. Does the agency go back to the kind of Mad Men model where you've got the same folks sitting along, or does it all stay separated as Irwin and Martin, you know, blasted out media years ago for leverage? What's your thoughts on that?
So I think you heard a lot of interesting comments before. I don't think there is any one model. We have different accounts that are set up different ways, but I will tell you one principle that I think is important and critical. There's semantics. These are my definitions beyond us, my company, and some of my colleagues are here. It doesn't mean a lot, and to our clients it does. But here's how I look at the world today. So there's this thing called creative, and we use these terms. We use the words creative. We use the words. So we use creative. We use digital. We use technology. We use these all in really interesting ways. So the way we use it is we say, look, creative is really simple. Creative is telling the story. That's never going to change.
Right.
You have to tell the story. And I think when you look at the creative that's happening in the world today, it's getting better and better. We went through a period of time when in the agency world, and I think even in the production world outside, you know, television, it just went downhill because we thought it was all about special effects. We thought it was about being weird. We thought it was about whatever. We're back to great content. So that's creative. Then you have the next piece, which is innovation. And so everybody talks about innovation, right? Well, you have to have innovative models, and you have to have new models. You know, at the end of the day, the only innovative model I want for my business is one that mirrors and helps my clients. So it's not about me, it's about my client. But the way we look at innovation, we say if creative is telling the story, innovation is how you distribute the story. So Facebook is an innovation. Snapchat's an innovation. These are innovations. These are ways that we get the story out. Don't get confused about innovating on the creative. The creative is a creative, it's a story. Now innovate on how, and production has always been innovative.
Right.
So innovate on how I deliver the story. Do I deliver it on a taxi? Do I deliver, as you were saying before, where am I going to deliver it? I think Rashad said that mass media will all be outdoors one day, and maybe that's true. That's innovation. The third is technology. And so where does technology fit? Technology today allows us to interact in ways that we never could before. So when you take creativity and you say it's a story, you take innovation and say it's distribution, and you take technology and you say that's the thing that allows us to interact in ways that we couldn't before, I think that to me is the ecosystem, the primary ecosystem that will create and allow us to do things that we could never do before.
That really puts it together. And the importance of telling stories will always continue.
Never going to change.
Yeah, you know, the head of, the guy that created 60 Minutes, Don Hewitt, when he retired, and it was the most successful show and long running on television. When they asked him what was his greatest reason for success, he said, I gave the American public 4 words that they wanted every day, every night: tell me a story. And if you think about it, it was news, but he was telling stories, and that's what did so well. So that will always continue. And look, Y&R are great storytellers, and we're going to hear from some of the early days at Y&R in a minute from the great Shane Moss.
Okay.
A couple of questions. We just have time for 1 or 2 quick ones for David. Has anybody got anything out there?
They don't buy me lunch if I don't get at least one question.
Yeah, really. And lunch is coming up. We have one from Kat Greenleaf. Yes.
And yes, I have seen you in the back of cabs. Yeah, not just
And
me.
I've seen you back. It's creepy. I hear so many people come in and say, here's the next big thing. I know how we're going to conquer the next wave. And I always think, wow, you're an idiot. Nobody knows. Really, nobody knows how it's going to happen, because we don't know what technology is going to crawl out of a rock tomorrow. We don't know how consumer appetites are going to change. So when someone tells you they know exactly how they're going to do it for one of your clients, is your reaction different
Yeah, I
than mine?
think they're idiots.
Idiots.
Yeah, absolutely. my personal crystal ball is very cloudy, and that's why I said I'd look to 2022. Like, think about, I'd like to look for inflection points.
I don't think you look over 20.
That will be an inflection. But I will say one thing, and it comes back to maybe, and I think it gets to what you're saying, but also talks about this story thing. So people ask me, like, what should kids learn today? If you want to be in the creative side of the business, what should you learn? So the people say, well, they've got to be up on what's new. Well, who knows what's tomorrow, right? So you could teach them. I just bought my oldest grandson, Henry, this little computer. We built it together, and he's learning how to code. And I'm thinking, okay, that's great, but like in 6 months, that coding is going to be old. And by the time he's older, that coding, who knows what it's going to be? It'll come out of his head. It'll be telekinetic, So when people ask me, what is it you should learn to be able to create? I said, read Homer. Read the Iliad and the Odyssey. Read the Bible. Read the Quran.
Yeah.
Like, read Harry Potter. Understand why these things that were written and told thousands, hundreds, tens of years ago, why are they still connected with people? Because if you can understand that, then you can understand, consider all the big data in the world can get you to that kind of connectivity. So we need to understand, what is it about those stories that connected, that so touched our DNA, that was so core to who we are as human beings, that we still talk about them, that we still repeat them, that we're still about them. What about that advertising from 50 years ago? And Jane's going to come up here. I mean, I love New York, right? That is so iconic. Not only is it because you could never beat it, not only is it back, but it's spawned an entire world full of I love whatever.
Everything.
So now we say I heart, but hello, we all know, Jane, it's I love. And so there you are. So great ideas, great thoughts, they resonate with us as human beings, and that's what we need to learn. The other stuff just happens. It's always going to happen. It's going to change. Innovation, the technology, it's always going to change. Those 2 pieces change constantly. Storytelling doesn't change.
And that makes for great advertising, a great advertiser, a great global mensch. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.